Hello friends. This is Phoenix What If. How are you all? So in this video, we will see. What if Naruto awakened with the power of Spirit King and Crimson Blade? But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also if possible share this video with your friends. Now without wasting any more time, let's begin the story. The two jutsu clashed as the wind swirled around Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha. They both pushed more and more chakra into their jutsu, hoping to overpower the other. Before too long though, Sasuke was able to push Naruto back and stab him in his chest, while Naruto was only able to create a slash mark on Sasuke's headband. Naruto's eyes widened as the pain came crashing into him, and he could do nothing but fall back to earth, crashing into the solid ground. Sasuke limped over to his ex-best friend and looked down at him with no emotion showing on his face before his eyes turned crimson with a flower in the center of each one. He watched Naruto's body for a minute before a single tear fell from his eye. A tear of blood. Sasuke Uchiha looked to the forest, then back at Naruto before disappearing into the forest. Had he looked back, he would have seen the seal on his stomach glow before Naruto vanished, never to be seen in the elemental nation ever again. The Shinigami, the death god, looked down at the boy who had appeared before him. He had watched him since he sealed the Kyuubi no Kitsune into him. He saw his life from beginning to his end, dying trying to bring back his friend. What should I do with him though? Since I sealed the fox into him, he is my responsibility. The god thought it over for a bit before an idea came to him. That could work. That fool Aizen keeps trying to get to me and is causing problems in Soul Society. Before that though, let's do something with that mangy fox. The god nodded to himself before he pushed his hand into Naruto's body and then pulled it out along with what looked like an evil crimson-red orb. He then took both hands and proceeded to rip the orb in half. An orb now lay in each hand. One was a deep scarlet that radiated evil, while the other was a beautiful crimson that radiated warmth, kindness, and love. The god then placed the evil-feeling orb into Naruto's body, and then the crimson one followed. Once both orbs were in his body, the hole in his body began to heal. After a few minutes the hole was close and the death god was smiling happily. Yes. You will be great someday, Naruto Uzumaki. For now though, I will send you to your new home, Soul Society. A black substance surrounded Naruto before it, and he both vanished, leaving a happy god alone to watch the show. Naruto groaned and muttered to himself as he got up. He lazily looked around while his eyes adjusted to the morning light. He saw that he was in a nice-looking village or town. He stood and noticed that he had on a black pair of pants and a red shirt along with traveling sandals. Once he finished looking over himself, he headed towards the nearest store. When he arrived, he saw that it was a food stand. He ignored the loud grumble from his stomach before asking the owner, "Hey, can you tell me where I am, sir?" Said person was snapped out of his thoughts before he focused his attention on the kid in front of him. His eyes saddened slightly when he noticed how young he was. He shook it off before answering. "Sure, Sonny. You are in what is called Soul Society. This just happens to be the 4th district of Rukongai. Now the Rukongai is the biggest part of Soul Society because it has 320 districts." He looked at Naruto to see if he was still with him, and when he was sure that he was, he continued. "Now Soul Society, if a place where people go when they die. I guess you could kind of call this place heaven. So I'm dead." The store owner, keeper, looked at the blonde kid to see that he was slightly confused and a little panicked. "Yo. Calm down, Sonny. This is a truly good place to live. Also you don't have to worry about eating. That is unless you have Riryoku, spiritual power." Naruto nodded and thought over what he had learned before asking a question. "What is this Riryoku?" The old man thought about how he should explain this before giving up and just decided to tell him what he was told when he came here. "Well, you see, there are people that are called Shinigami. They are able to use this energy to do things that are like spells. And they also have swords that every Shinigami has. These people live in what is called Seirei, Court of Pure Souls. That is over there." He pointed behind Naruto, who turned to see white buildings surrounding what looked like a huge hill which was connected to a huge building. "That is where Shinigami work to protect us all and defeat the hollows. Now hollow or soul that have gone bad, I guess you could say. They eat other soul to live, and some do it just to have fun. Anyway, where was? Oh, yeah. They also have an academy that anyone with Riryoku can go to learn how to control their power. Naruto nodded and sorted through all that he learned before he thought of something. Why do you have to learn how to control your power? It's not like it will hurt anyone, right? The man looked at Naruto before answering. Well, if don't learn to control your power, you could release what is called Ryotsu, spiritual pressure. This pressure can hurt people who do not have Ryoku. It presses down on people, and if you are not strong enough it will hurt you. Naruto nodded. Liking this Shinigami deal the more he learned. He even had to suppress a smile so that he would get carried away and act like an idiot. He thought this over before deciding that he would like to be a Shinigami. Where can I find this academy? The old man looked at him before bursting out laughing. When he was calmed down he answered the now angry Naruto. Kid, did you not listen? You have to have Riryoku to go to the academy, and to have Riryoku you have to be hungry. But I am hungry. The man looked at him carefully before asking, and why are you just now telling me this? Naruto scratched the back of his neck as he answered nervously, well, I only became hungry a little while ago after I looked at your food. He continued to look into Naruto's eyes before nodding and going into the back room. He returned minutes later with what looked like dangos. He handed them to Naruto, who looked hesitant to take them, but a nod from the old man let him know that he could have them. After he was finished, the owner took the plate from Naruto and began to clean it as he spoke. You just so happen to be lucky. Today some Shinigami are coming for the annual lookout for new recruits. They should be over by that gate. Naruto followed his finger to see a gate behind a row of houses. He could even hear some people talking and arguing. Naruto nodded and thanked the old man before heading towards the gate. When he arrived he found people in what looked like a Japanese battle kimono. It's the bleach out the Shinigami wear, not sure what it is called, just go with it for now. He was within hearing distance. He here won the Shinigami, at least he thought it was a Shinigami since he had a sword on his hip. Say, alright, if you think you can be a Shinigami you need to stand in a line and repeat what I say. When everyone was in the line he spoke, now. I am going to say the lowest level Kido spell that Shinigami learn. I want you to repeat it and concentrate on your middle and pointer finger. You are to point at the Shinigami that is in front of you and try to get it to work. He then said the incantation and waited for everyone to remember it before telling them that they could give it a try. Naruto pointed his two kneaded fingers and his Shinigami target and started. Bakudo. Way of binding. 1. Crawling rope. A crimson rope shot from Naruto's fingers and wrapped around the Shinigami, completely restraining him. Naruto grinned to himself before he thought about what happened. When he said the words he felt like energy was going into his finger and changing into the rope. He smiled when he realized that this meant that he indeed had this Riryoku. Alright. Everyone who was able to do it, please cut the connection to the spell and come with us. If you failed you are to go home and try again if you wish next time. Naruto frowned. How was he supposed to cut the connection? He finally just shrugged and stopped the energy flow to his hand. He smiled when it worked. When the group arrived at the academy the Shinigami turned them over to the principal. He sorted through paper before handing one to everyone. These will be your schedules and it also has your room number on it. Class starts in 3 days. Good luck and I hope you do well. They nodded before going their separate ways. Naruto headed out to look for his room and found it 5 minutes later. He pushed the door open and entered. After he closed the door behind him he looked around. He saw 2 beds, 2 desks, and 2 closets. There also appeared to be 2 bathrooms. He saw that the bed on his left was already taken as it had stuff on it, so he went ahead and unpacked the clothes that the principal gave the group when they arrived. When he had finished he heard the door open and saw a red-headed teen walk in. Naruto saw that he also had black tribal tattoos on his upper body and his hair was tied up in a ponytail along with a black headband wrapped around his forehead. The redhead walked towards his bed when he sensed someone in the room. He spun around to see Naruto sitting on the other bed that was in the room. Hi. Naruto chuckled at his nervousness before saying, hello. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Renji Abarai. Naruto nodded before saying, good to meet you. Do you know how long we have to stay here? Renji nodded before answering his question. Yeah, it is 6 years. Naruto's jaw dropped. 6 years? They had to stay here for 6 years. Naruto groaned as he flopped onto his bed. Renji chuckled at his roommate's expression. Anyway, when class starts I want to introduce you to some of my friends. Naruto smiled at him and nodded before looking out the window. It was dark out. Naruto sighed before getting ready for bed and Renji followed his lead. Soon they were both fast asleep. Renji. You need to get up, class starts soon. Said person groaned and muttered about needing sleep. He got anyways and Naruto swore that he said that the little black devil would get him if he was late. Naruto just chuckled at his friend's attitude with the morning. Soon they were both head to their first which they both had together. When they entered Renji headed over to a group of 3 people that were talking. When they were closer Naruto could make out their appearance. They all wore the school uniform, as it was mandatory, but he could see that they did not mind. Unlike himself as he hated it. One of them was fairly tall, just slightly shorter than Naruto himself. He had shoulder-length light yellow hair but, part of it the front covered his left eye. He seemed slightly quiet and shy from the other 2. The next one was only about 5 feet tall. She had dark hair that was tied up into a bun and seemed like a fun person as she was smiling and laughed at something the girl next to her said. The next girl had black hair except one of her bangs was directly in between her eyes. She was also just barely shorter than the dark-haired girl. Hey guys, I want you to meet my roommate. The dark-haired girl smiled and held out her hand as she spoke. Hi, my name is Momo Hinamori. It is nice to meet you. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto shook her hand before shaking the blonde boy's. Izuru Kira. Rukia Kuchiki. Naruto looked at the black-haired girl when she spoke and nodded politely at her. Momo then asked what their schedules were. They all looked at them to see that they all had the same classes. First, history. Second, zanjutsu, swordsmanship. Third, kido, demon arts. Fourth, hakuda, hand-to-hand combat. Fifth, meditation. Sixth, shunpo, flash step. All right. We are all together for the next 6 years. Naruto smiled at Momo happily before they all started talking about the upcoming years. 6 years later. All right everyone, calm down. Now when your name is called I want you to come and sit in the middle of this circle that we have drawn. It will help with the manifestation of your Zanpakuto when you enter your inner world. Naruto tuned out the rest of the principal's speech. They were currently in the Zanjutsu room as it was the biggest room in the building. They were getting their Zanpakuto today as it was graduation day. Tomorrow they would be sorted into one of the divisions. He, Renji, Rukia, and Momo had not changed much except for him. He had lost all his baby fat and the bangs on the side of his face had grown to just below his eyes. They had gotten closer though. They would each help each other in their work and would also have fun together when they had no classes. Renji Aburai. Naruto watched as Renji sat in the circle and went to get his sword. There was one thing though that he did not tell his friends. He had already met his sword's spirit. He even had spent every sleeping moment with her so that he could know her better. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto stood and headed to the circle. When he sat down he immediately entered his inner world. Inner world. When Naruto opened his eyes he was greeted with a beautiful field with a lake, flowers, and his favorite a big tree that had crimson petals. He stood and looked around for his Zanpakuto. He didn't see her around and frowned but it changed into a smile when he felt a familiar weight and 2 very soft pillows push onto his back. He couldn't stop the slight blush that appeared on his face. He still could not get used to her doing this. Hello. Are you glad to see me again? Naruto asked as his blush stayed in place. He knew that she was smiling. Naruto felt her unwrap her arms from his neck and he turned to look at her. She was a vision of beauty. She was slightly shorter than his with crimson hair that flowed down her back like a waterfall. She wore a dress that went down to her ankles along with a slit on the right side that went up to her thigh. The dress also showed off her curves and her D-cup S. She also had 9 crimson tails, with black tips, that came out of her tailbone along with crimson fox ears on her head also with black tips. The one thing that he loved most of all though was her eyes. Her beautiful crimson eyes. He could just stare into them all day. Which in fact he did on many nights. Yes I am. Though I am sure that this is a business visit. He smiled before replying, for now. She smiled as well before saying, you know what to do. I have already given you permission to use me as you choose. Naruto shook his head as he realized what she meant by that. Some other time. I did promise to take you for myself when I was ready. Her smile took a seductive turn as she walked away. I know and I will be waiting for you when you do. I even have the bed ready for you. Naruto shook his head with a chuckle along with his blush increasing and his pants getting tighter as he watched her very firm butt sway as she walked away. She has a fine ass. Yes I do. Naruto chuckled as he left his inner world. Real world. When he came to he felt a slight weight on his lap. He looked down to see a katana lying in his lap. It looked like a regular katana except that it was slightly longer than a normal one and the blade was crimson red. The guard was also different as it was in the shape of a 9-pointed star. The handle was crimson. He smiled at his blade as he put it in his sheath that had appeared next to him. After tying it to his waist he joined his friends. He took time to look and see what their swords looked like. Momo's was a regular katana with the guard being a 5-petal flower design stamped on the rectangular crossguard with a light red handle. Izuru's was a plain-looking katana, though he could see that the crossguard was a normal rectangular one, with only an omega design on the top and bottom half. Rukia's was a normal katana with a rectangular tsuba with inward curved edges and a reddish-brown handle. And last, but not least, was Renji's. It was a normal katana but has a rectangular bronze handguard with a jagged design to it and a red handle. This is awesome. We finally get to be in the 13 court guard squads. Naruto smiled at his friend's excitement. Yes, it is Renji-san. I personally want to be in the 10th division. Momo looked at him and asked, why do you want to be in the 10th squad, Naruto-kun? Naruto chuckled as he messed with her hair as a brother or a sister would do. Why, so that I can keep an eye on Hitsugaya Taicho, means captain, and Rangaku-chan, Momo-chan. Momo smiled at him as she said, thank you for trying to look out for them. I have trouble doing it by myself. As for the divisions I would like to go to the 5th division. Naruto frowned slightly at that. As Momo talked to Renji and Rukia, as Izuru was studying his sword, Naruto thought about the 5th division. He had nothing personal against the division but it was Aizen Taicho that bothered him. He just got this strange feeling. Like Aizen was not to be trusted, or that he was not who he was supposed to be. He tended to trust his instinct and was slightly tense if Aizen was near. He dismissed this line of thought for now and rejoined his friends, who had started towards his and Renji's room, to talk and have fun till tomorrow, and they were separated for a little bit. Naruto smiled as he looked forward to the future and to working with his Zanpakuto. Naruto leaned lazily against the wall while facing the captains and the captain commander. His friends had already been assigned to their division. He was the only one left. Renji had gotten placed in the 11th division with Kenpachi Taicho. Rukia was with Yukitake Taicho in the 13th division. Momo was in the 5th division with Aizen Taicho. Izuru was placed in the 3rd division with Jin Taicho. Naruto was dragged from his thoughts by the captain commander slamming his cane into the floor to get everyone's attention. Now then, we have one more recruit left. Naruto Uzumaki. He is a well-rounded student but likes to mostly use Zanjutsu and Kido. Is there anyone who would like him? The 2nd, 4th, 5th, 8th, 10th, and 13th division captains raised their hands. General Yamamoto silently groaned. He cleared his head and then began to get rid of all the groups that the young man would not fit into in his mind. The 2nd, 4th, and 5th were out as Naruto was not suited for the groups, so that left the 10th and 13th. Where should I place you, young man? Place him in the 10th division, Yamamoto-san. The general's eyes opened slightly in surprise. His sword had not taken an interest in a person until he found Yukitake Taicho and Shunsui Taicho, his former apprentices. And why, my friend, should I place him in that particular division? I sense a great power in him. He will become a strong person in the future if he can control it. I believe that Hitsugaya Taicho can help getting him ready for when he finds this power. The general thought for a moment before deciding. I have decided on Naruto-san's placement. He shall be placed in the 10th division. Students, please find your new captains and follow them to your quarters. The students followed his orders and headed for their assigned captains. Naruto said goodbye to his friends before heading over to the smallest captain that was there. He looked around 14 or 15, though he was only about 4 feet 4 inches in height. His hair was short and spiked up and was a snow-white color. He wore the regular Shinigami attire, same as he wore, except that he had a sleeveless captain's haori on with a 10 on it. Hitsugaya Taicho, it's nice to see you again. Is Rangaku-chan still annoying you? The short captain's eyes twitched as he looked at his new subordinate. Yes. Though she would be better if you stopped giving her shake. Naruto just grinned at him and his captain sighed before leading him to his division's barracks. Once they arrived, Naruto heard someone shout out his name and quickly dodged to his left. The result of this was Rangaku crashing into his captain and pulling his face into her S. Naruto watched with amusement shining in his eyes as Rangaku continued to smother the 10 division, thinking that it was him. Once she saw that it was not him, she was hugging, strangling. She looked down at her captain and said, "Taicho, I didn't know that you were a pervert." Said captain's face turned red before he broke free and started to argue with Rangaku. Naruto chuckled as he watched them. "They look like an old married couple. That they do, my beloved." Naruto smiled as he felt soft silk-like fabric on his back and strong but soft arms circle his neck. He turned his head to see his Zanpakuto spirit. Her red eyes showed love and happiness. He smiled wider at her. She grinned before ing him and then fading away. "Naruto-kun. Naruto-kun, are you okay?" He turned to see that it was Rangaku that brought him out of his makeout session. "Yes, I am, Rangaku-chan." She smiled at him as Toshiro cleared his throat. Once he had their attention, he spoke. "Now Naruto-san. You will be tested to see where you will be in the division. It will start at noon, which is in 2 hours. Before that, Rangaku here will show you your room and give you your tour." With that, he left to get the test ready and to finish some of the paperwork that he still had. Rangaku smiled before grabbing his hand and then dragged him around the barracks. She showed him his room, the dojo, the cafeteria, and the captain's office. After that, he sat by one of the trees in the yard that they had in the backyard. Rangaku had to go finish some of her paperwork, so he decided to rest before his test. After a few minutes, he was fast asleep. When he awoke, someone was shaking his shoulders. He looked up to see on the members of the division. "Hitsugaya Taicho told me to get you. It is time for your test." Naruto nodded at him and thanked him before getting up. He grinned as he stretched. "Lead the way." The man nodded before leading him to the dojo. Inside, he saw every member of the division was present. In the middle of the dojo, the captain and Rangaku were waiting for him. They nodded at him and called him over. When he was in front of them, he grinned in anticipation. Toshiro grinned at him as well before beginning his instruction. "Now that everyone is present, I would like to introduce you to Naruto Uzumaki. He will be fighting you to see what seat he will be taking. Since we do this with every new member, we will start with a seated officer and then either move up or down to see where he will be placed." Whispers broke out through the crowd as the captain and lieutenant went to join the other member and left Naruto in the center of the circle that was made. He turned when someone walked forward and stopped in front of him. He had black hair and middle build along with a beard. He wore the regular Shinigami attire like himself. "Greetings, Naruto-san. I am the 3rd seed of the 10th division. I will fight you first and then you will fight the 4th or the lieutenant depending on if you win or lose." "Oh, my name is Jace. Shall we begin?" Naruto nodded at him as he unsheathed his sword. The red blade glinted in the light as his opponent also unsheathed his sword as well. They stared at each other before blurring away using shunpo. Their swords clashed in the middle of the circle as they tried to overpower the other. Naruto tilted his sword to his left to finally deflect the blow and tried to slash at his opponent's torso. He blocked before jumping away and pointing his fingers at Naruto and spoke, "Bakudo 8, crawling rope." A brown rope shot from his fingers and headed to Naruto before it could, though he said, "Bakudo 39, arc shield." A red circle appeared in front of him and deflected the rope. Once his shield dropped, he spoke again. "Hado, way of destruction, 9. Crimson lightning shot from his fingers and headed to Jace. The 3rd seat's eye widened before he snapped out of it and jumped to his left. He came to a stop right next to the outer part of the ring. He turned to see what the lightning had done and his mouth dropped slightly at seeing the large hole in the wall. He froze when he felt the cold feeling of metal at his throat. Jace looked up to see Naruto above him with his red blade poised at his throat, grinning from ear to ear. "So I guess this means I win, huh?" Jace stared at him blankly before grinning, then laughing. When he calmed down, he stood up with Naruto's help and nodding at him. As Jace walked back to the crowd grinning, Naruto finally realized that everyone was staring at him with their jaws dropped. He looked at them before asking, "What?" The group shook their heads before looking at their captain, who was smiling along with Rangaku. Toshiro nodded to Rangaku, who also nodded and moved to the circle. The strawberry blonde and the sun-ed blonde watched each other before they rushed forward and withdrawing their blades. They met with a clank. The swords pushed against each other, neither person willing to lose. Rangaku moved one of her hands, while still keeping the pressure on Naruto's blade, and pointed her palm at Naruto and saying, "Hado 31, shot of red fire." The red ball of fire launched at Naruto causing an explosion, but Rangaku was able to avoid it thanks to the fact that she launched it away from her. Smoke blocked everyone's view of Naruto and the group started to whisper that he had lost. That changed when they heard his voice in the smoke. Hado 63, twin lotus blue fire, crashed down. The huge ball of blue fire erupted from the smoke and headed towards Matsumoto. Her eyes widened at seeing him use such a high-level spell. Better yet, how did he even know it? She snapped out of it and placed her hand on her blade and spoke her sword's command. Growl, Hineka, Ash Cat. Matsumoto's blade turned to ash and formed a shield in front of her. Naruto's Kido spell collided with the ash shield causing a small explosion. When the dust and smoke settled, everyone saw Naruto grinning as he looked at the ash that was Rangaku's Shikai. Only Matsumoto noticed that the captain was glaring at her. She flinched slightly at remembering that the captain told her that she was not to use her Shikai. She had no choice though. She could not make a good enough shield spell to block it. She was broken out of his thoughts when Naruto spoke to the captain. "Hey Hitsugaya Taicho, you didn't say that we could use Shikai, right?" No, I didn't say that you could use Shikai," Toshiro answered, wondering where he was going with this. His eyes widened when he realized why Naruto was asking him this. Naruto grinned before speaking while holding his sword in a loving manner. Oinari, fox goddess, Naruto's Ryatsu spiked and his sword gave off a bright light that made everyone shield their eyes. When they looked back to Naruto, they saw that his blade had changed. The sword now looked like a dato, Japanese long sword. The blade was still the same crimson red, but the handle now had 9 red fox tails coming from the end of the pommel. The symbol for fox now acted as the guard. Naruto grinned as he cherished the blade before using Shunpo to get behind Matsumoto. Her ash was able to block the sword, but Naruto vanished and attacked in different positions before she could attack him with her ash. Though some her excess ash was able to give him a few cuts. Naruto finally stopped in front of her and her saw that he looked like he was tiring pretty fast. She grinned at seeing this before sending her ash at Naruto and forming it into a tornado that surrounded him. "Do you give up, Naruto-kun?" Naruto shook his head and grinned at her as he replied. "Nope, I will at least injure you some before I faint." With that said, Naruto gathered the last of his Ryatsu and called upon the power of his tails. The tails moved to the sides and above him so that they all circled him. He focused the last of his Ryatsu, which was still a lot, at the tip of his tails. A red ball of fire appeared on the tip of each tail. Hado 31. Shot of red fire. All 9 red balls of fire shot out at Rangaku's ash, creating a huge explosion. When the smoke cleared, everyone saw Naruto unconscious on the floor and Rangaku smiling at him. Before the crowd could congratulate her, blood erupted from a slash on her torso. She looked down to look at the wound and saw that it was not that serious. She wobbled slightly from all the Ryatsu she used and the blood she lost after the adrenaline rush ended. She decided to sit down before she fell and looked to her captain and asked, "Hey Taicho, do you know how Naruto-kun was able to cut me from 30 feet away?" The snow-white-haired captain nodded and pointed behind her. She turned her head and saw Naruto's, now unreleased, Zanpakuto sticking in the ground with blood on it. She turned to the captain and raised an elegant questioning eyebrow. The young captain sighed at having to explain this to her. When he cast the Kido spell, he was able to blast most for it out of the way, and I saw him throw the sword at you. I did not stop it because he was not aiming to kill you. Just like he said he would injure you before he fainted. He grinned at her, enjoying the fact that a new academy graduate was able to injure her. She glared at him before asking, "Do you know how he was able to use such high levels of Kido spells and the fact that he knew Shikai?" The captain shook his head in a negative but answered her question. "No, I do not know how he knows, but I do have an idea how he knows. No, I will not tell you it. You can wait until we speak to Naruto when he wakes up." Rangaku pouted and crossed her arms underneath her, which made them look bigger than they were, as he short captain turned to the group and spoke to them all. "That is all. You may all go back to work. You can all congratulate him later for becoming the new 3rd seat." With that, the crowd dispersed and started to talk about their new member of the 10th Division as their captain took him to the 4th squad to heal. Naruto groaned as he returned to consciousness. Once his eyes had adjusted to the light, he was able to see that he was in what he guessed to be a hospital room. I hate hospital rooms. There is nothing but white and more white. I wonder if I can sneak out of here. The door to his room opened and he turned his head to look at who entered, as his body still was sore to move. The woman he saw was who remembered as the 4th Division captain. She had shiny black hair that she had braided down her front. She wore the captain haori over the tradition Shinigami wear, though it looked like hers was slightly baggier. Her hair framed her heart-shaped face and her blue eyes. Her zanpakuto was tied to her left hip. Naruto blinked at her as he thought, so this is Retsu Unohana that Kyoraku Taicho and Yukataki Taicho were telling me about. They were right, she is beautiful, but I have seen pictures of Yoruichi Shiwan. Now that is a beautiful woman. He was knocked out of his thoughts by the 4th captain's voice. Well, it looks like you are healing well and should be able to leave tomorrow. Though I have never seen anyone heal as fast as you, Naruto-kun. The sun-ed blonde blinked before saying, thank you Unohana Taicho. Will my captain be stopping by anytime soon? The woman nodded before saying, yes, he said that he will be here at 3 to talk to you. That will be in an hour. Until then I will have someone bring you something to eat. You have been asleep for about 2 days. Naruto's eyes widened at that bit of information. After 5 minutes another member of the 4th Division came and gave him his late lunch. Once he was finished he once more looked around the room after laying his food tray on his bedside table. The room had all sorts of medical equipment in it along with 2 windows that were to his right and left. As he turned to look at his right he saw that his zanpakuto was lying on a table that was by his bed. As soon as he picked up his beloved he felt the familiar feelings of love and adoration. He let a smile slip onto his face as he held it his lap. Before he could start talking to his sword spirit though his door opened once more and before he could act his head was pulled in between 2 very big, very soft, pillows. He waved his hands around trying to get free. As his face started to turn blue he heard his captain tell Rangaku to let go of him. As he gulped in a large quantity of air he waved of Rangaku who was apologizing to him over and over again. When he could finally get his breathing under control he smiled at his captain and lieutenant. Rangaku returned it while Toishiro had a small smirk. The short, white-haired captain cleared his throat before asking, I am glad you are all right, Naruto-san. Now I would like to personally congratulate you on your performance and you getting the 3rd seat of my division. Now I am sure that you also know what we are here for. Naruto nodded and answered, my Shikai. You should sit down since it is a little bit of a long story. They both nodded and pulled their seats over to his bed to listen. Well, first I don't know everything that Oinari, Fox Goddess, can do. She still wants me to train and learn the rest of it. He paused here before continuing. I first learned my spirit's name about a month after I first met her. My fight with Rangaku-chan was when I first activated it. He stopped and looked at his leader and friends. He could not stop the grin that found its way on his face after seeing their expressions. Hitsugaya had his jaw drop slightly but Rangaku had her eyes wide and her jaw was on the floor. After they recovered themselves Toshiro asked, can you tell us what your zanpakuto does that you know of? Naruto nodded at him before answering. I can, as you may have guessed, fire Kido spells from the tips of the tail that come out of the pommel. I can also impale things with the tips of the tail. I also can call out a shield that is stronger than any Kido spell, but other than that I will have to train with her to learn anything else. His captain nodded as he stood up. As he walked out Naruto heard him say, good. I will have trained to master your Shikai before you do anything else. After you do I will start giving you missions or assignments. Naruto nodded before turning to Rangaku and arguing which sake was better. As they continued to argue Naruto could help but think that his life was getting better. Time skip. Naruto could not believe that it had been 50 years since the talk he had with his captain. He was able to master his Shikai in 10 years before Toshiro decided to finally assign him a mission. So for 40 years he had been doing missions, getting to know his subordinates, and finally he was able to get together with his friends a few times each month. They would all go have dinner together or train. Sometimes they would even just go lay out on a clear grass hill and share stories on what had happened. Yes. Those were good times. Naruto thought as he headed to a captain's meeting. He had been called by the general for some reason. He wondered if this was about Rukia going missing. Rukia had to go to the human world to kill some hollow about a week ago. About 2 days into her mission, her Riryoku signature had gone missing. He wasn't worried. He had personal help Rukia in her training. Naruto snapped out of his thoughts when he saw that he had arrived at the giant wooden door that led to the captain's meeting room. He knocked on the door and waited for his permission to enter. He heard the old general's voice say for him to enter, and he did. When he was in between the line that all the 12 captains made, with the general on his big chair opposite him, he stopped and waited. Naruto Uzumaki, the old general started, "Do you know why I have called you to this captain's meeting?" Naruto thought for a moment before answering, "Does it have to do with the fact that my friend, Rukia Kuchiki, has gone missing in the human world, sir?" Naruto swore he saw the old man smile before it was gone. "Yes, that is the reason. I want you to go with Kuchiki Taicho and Lieutenant Renji Ibari." Naruto smiled, happy that he could do a mission with his friend, before nodding to the general. He left to pack when he was given the order. Break. At the personal gate of the Kuchiki clan, Naruto waited for Renji and Byakuya. Since they were leaving through the Kuchiki's personal gate to the human world, he had to wait for Byakuya to personally open it. Naruto turned to see that the 6th captain and lieutenant had arrived by Shunpo. Naruto and Renji grinned at each other, high-fived each other before turning to their leader for this mission. Byakuya looked at Naruto for a moment before nodding to himself and turning to the gate. After unsheathing his blade, he thrusted it into the gate and turned his sword clockwise until it was horizontal. The gate glowed white before flashing. When it died down, Renji and Naruto saw that it was open and Byakuya was already walking down the spiritual road. Naruto and Renji nodded to each other and ran after their captain, leader. Break. Once the 3 Shinigami exited the gate and it had closed, Byakuya turned to his subordinates. "Now then, we are to scatter and look for Rukia. When you find her, flare your Ryatsu. Any questions?" Naruto concentrated for a moment before turning back to his leader and said, "Byakuya Taicho?" "What? Taicho? I can sense Rukia-chan's spiritual pressure. It is very small, almost human levels." Kuchiki clan leader looked at him before nodding and asking, "And how were you able to sense her spiritual pressure when I could not?" "If you concentrate hard enough, you can sense it as well. In fact, it looks like she is headed this way now, Taicho." The captain concentrated before nodding and turning to his right. Renji and Naruto turned as well to see Rukia come out of the trees. "Ah. Rukia-chan, we have come to bring you back to the Soul Society." Rukia hesitated before nodding at Naruto and started to walk over to them. She stopped half to them though when she felt a familiar spiritual pressure. Naruto's eyes widened at the amount of pressure before he grinned and turned to Renji. "Hey Renji, this must be the human that Rukia-chan gave her powers to. Do you want to fight him or can I?" Renji thought for a moment before saying, "You can. I already got to fight a little while ago." Naruto nodded before stepping forward as an orange-haired kid appeared behind Rukia. He had on the Shinigami attire along with a huge sword. It was a normal katana but oversized with a brown sheath on his back. The kid looked at them before asking, "That are you doing, Rukia, and who are these people?" Rukia looked at him before answering, "I have to return to Soul Society. These people are here to take me back. Please leave Ichigo." Naruto nodded before stepping forward again. "Yes, that is correct. I am Naruto Uzumaki, one of Rukia's friends back in Soul Society. We were ordered to come get Rukia-chan after she disappeared off our radar." The kid, Ichigo, he corrected himself, nodded before asking, "What will happen after she goes back?" Before Naruto could answer, Renji spoke up. "She will be arrested, then put on trial. She could have punishment anywhere from community service to execution. Though since she is a part of the Kuchiki clan, and they are strict on rules, she will most likely before sentenced to jail or killed." Naruto, Renji, and Rukia looked at each other sadly before Ichigo whispered, "No." "What?" Naruto asked, confused. "No, I won't let you take her." Naruto sighed before saying, "Look kid, we just need to get Rukia and head back. We aren't looking for a fight." Before he could continue, Ichigo launched himself at Naruto, sword drawn and moving in a deadly arch. He ignored Rukia's pleas to stop as Naruto drew his own sword and blocked. Naruto sighed as he muttered, "Guess I have no choice." Quickly diverting the blade, he went for a slash at Ichigo's midsection. The orange-haired boy blacked the sword before pushing off and swinging at his head. Naruto ducked and swung at his chest. Blood flowed out of Ichigo's wound as he jumped back to get his breath back. Now do you see you can't beat me? You are several decades behind before you can beat me, and even if you do beat me, Renji could easily finish you as you would to tired. Then there is Byakuya Taicho, who can kill you before you can blink. So just give up and leave. Naruto waited for his answer before his eyes widened again as Ryotsu exploded off of Ichigo. He looked up and Naruto saw that his eyes were now glowing blue and held mothering but determination. Naruto sighed before holding his sword in a loving manner and whispering, "Purr, Oinari, fox goddess." Naruto's flashed, it changed to his Shikai. Byakuya focused on the fight more and Naruto's Shikai, as it was the first time that he had seen it. Naruto shun-PO'd behind the teen and slashing at his back. Ichigo, though, was able to block the blade with ease before pushing it off and slashing at Naruto's head. Naruto jumped back to dodge it. What the hell is going on? A second ago he was fighting like an armature, now it's like fighting Rangaku-chan. Naruto paused and looked at his opponent's Zanpakuto. It had a blue glow around it, same as Ichigo now had. Naruto thought for a moment before a light bulb went off in his head. Ah. So that is what is happening. This kid's Zanpakuto is giving its own power and instinct to him, making him fight and move with more power and grace. If this kid could harness his power, he could grow very powerful. His thoughts were stopped when Ichigo once again launched himself at him. Naruto blocked his sword before mentally ordering his tails to attack. The tails stiffened before attacking Ichigo. Now what most don't know about his tails is that he could make them as soft as real tails or as hard and sharp as his own sword. He could also increase their length. Renji found that out the hard way when the tip of the tails stabbed him. Naruto thought as Ichigo continued to dodge or block the 8 tails coming after him. Naruto the other tail follow Ichigo's figure as he thought of the right Kido spell to use. I will just use a Bakudo to restrain him, then aim for his chest. He will die fairly fast and then we can take Rukia back, no matter how much I want to. Bakudo 61. 6 rods prison of light. 6 rods of light appeared around Ichigo and before he could escape, as the tails prevented it, they all slammed into his midsection. Naruto shun-PO'd behind him and thrusted his sword into Ichigo's chest, just a few inches from his heart. The Bakudo spell disintegrated as Naruto cancelled it and sheathed his, now normal, sword. Thank you for your help, beloved. He smiled as the familiar arms circled his neck as she ate his cheek before fading away with one sentence lingering in the air that only he could hear. You are welcome, my beloved. You are free to use my powers or you see fit. Remember though, you promised to come visit me soon. Naruto nodded before turning to Rukia. Come on, Rukia. Don't worry about him. If he receives medical help soon he will make it. Now come on, we have to get you back. No matter how much I do not want to take you back, as you will most likely be killed. He muttered the last part, but Rukia heard him and gave him a small sad smile. They walked back to Byakuya and Renji. The 3 friends gave each other a sad smile as Renji opened the world penetration gate, and they headed back to Seirei. Unknown location in forest. Golden Eyes watched the 4 Shinigami, or to be specific Naruto, as they headed back to Seirei. The eyes moved to Ichigo's prone form, then back to Naruto as he disappeared. Well, it looks like Kazuki was right. They did come for her. Oh well, we just have to go rescue her later when Ichigo is healed. Good news is that I got to see a hot new man fight. Wonder if I can have some fun with him when we do go get Rukia. The now identified feminine figure said as she giggled. Once she stopped, she shun-PO'd next to Ichigo and then shun-PO'd again to her friend's house to have Ichigo healed. Naruto sighed in frustration. He had just been informed from Hitsugaya Taicho that Runia-chan was to be executed by the Sokyoku. The Sokyoku. That was only for dangerous criminals or traitors. He also had this bad feeling. Like something bad was going to happen soon. And he would bet his own limbs that it had something to do with Ichigo or Aizen. Aizen Sosuke. That guy creeps me out. There just seems to be something wrong with him, or he has hidden something. Naruto was knocked out of his thoughts by Rangaku jumping on him. They were both sent crashing to the floor. Once Naruto was able to talk, as her s were taking the air from his lungs, he yelled, "What the hell? Rangaku-chan. What was that for, and will you get off me?" She got off him and crossed her arms as she pouted. You need to stop being moody. It's like you are ing out all the fun from the room. Plus I hate to see you sad. You are my friend. Naruto sighed before sitting back down on the couch that was in the lounge of the 10th Division. Sorry Rangaku-chan. I have been thinking about Rukia-chan and trying to think of a way to get her out of this or at least lower the punishment. I mean come on. Killed by the Sokyoku. This does not make sense. Rangaku nodded as she sat next to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. It will be all right, Naruto-kun. We will think of something. You still have a month to think of something. Now come on. You are going out with me and everyone else. We are going to drink and eat. And why am I going? Also who is going? Naruto asked as she dragged him out of the room. Rangaku thought for a moment before saying, you are going because if you continue to thin K you will just get frustrated with yourself. So you are going to relax for a while. As to who is going there is Izan Katetu, Rezu Unohana, Izuru Kira, Momo Hinamori, Renji Abarai, Shunsui Kiraku, Jashiro Yukitaki, and Hitsugaya Taicho. Naruto's jaw dropped. How were you able to get the captain to come? He never comes us to eat or drink. He always held up in his office. Or at least until I prank him or give you sake. She spoke without stopping, while still dragging him, which was starting to make him feel like a teddy bear. A giant teddy bear. I was able to finish his paperwork and my own and bugged him until he caved. Surprisingly it did not take that long, only 5 hours. Naruto chuckled to himself. That was Rangaku for ya. It took 20 minutes to get to the restaurant as Rangaku refused to release him. When they entered, or dragged in as is Naruto's case, they say everyone was sitting around a huge table in one of the corners of the restraint. Though Naruto saw that it still looked like there was room to move around. Sorry we're late, Rangaku spoke up as they neared, I had to drag this big baby here. Hey I resent that. Rangaku ignored him as she sat him in his chair and sat in the free one next to him. When everyone was comfortable again they all began to talk about different thing before their waiter came. After they had ordered they all talked to their friends. After their meals had arrived and were eaten Rangaku ordered some sake. Once it arrived it was dispersed. Naruto saw the problem with this idea after 20 minutes. Everyone except for Restu, Izan, Toshiro, and himself were drunk. Naruto saw Shunsui and Yukitaki were each holding a bottle of shake and singing some song together. He remembered hearing it somewhere but could not remember what it was. Izuru and Renji were trying to climb on top of each other for some reason and Momo was sleeping while also kicking them in her sleep. He looked over to his left and had to keep his jaw from dropping. Rangaku was giving a very badly blushing Toshiro Hitsugaya a lap dance. He grinned when he saw that Toshiro seemed to be enjoying it as he did nothing to stop her. Oh this is good. I have good blackmail on Toshiro. I wonder if I can use this to get to some of the higher level Kido spells I have been wanting to learn. Naruto was snapped out of his thoughts about destructive spells when he felt someone place their hand on his shoulder. He looked up to see Rest Unohana's motherly face. Well, Naruto-kun, I think it is time to take everyone home. Naruto nodded before standing and moving over to Renji, Izuru, and Momo, who were all now asleep. He put Momo on his back and pulled Renji and Izuru under each arm. He turned around to see that Izan and Restu had the captains of the 8th and 13th Division so he turned to Toshiro. Hey Hitsugaya Taicho. Naruto grinned when he almost flew out of his chair in embarrassment. Rangaku was now sitting on his lap with her head on his chest. His eyes traveled to Toshiro's hand which had, mysteriously, appeared on Rangaku's firm ass. When Toshiro saw where his hand was, as he had followed Naruto's gaze, he moved it so fast Naruto almost thought that it was not there, almost. I am guessing that you will take Rangaku-chan home, Taicho? Naruto asked with his eyebrow raised and his mouth in his foxy grin as Rangaku called it. Toshiro nodded before picking up Rangaku bridal style before returning his face back to his cold and indifferent expression. As he headed towards the door he said, you saw nothing Naruto-san. Naruto grinned before saying, maybe. Before Toshiro could say anything to him he had already shun-PO'd out of the building. The captain of the 10th Division sighed before looked at Rangaku's sleeping face. He stared before snapping out of his trance. As he walked back to his division he only had one thought. I wonder what Naruto-san is going to want to keep quiet about this. 4 days later, damn it. Why won't this work? Naruto yelled as he once again failed to do the new Kido spell he had been given by his Taicho. Blackmail is a very good thing to have. Naruto thought to himself as he calmed himself down and prepared to do his spell one again. By God do I play, fiends like fire so do I swear. I am thy chosen by might. Give me thy divine might and help me defeat my foe. Hado 86, Blazing Fire, Fox's Rage. Blazing red fire gathered in front of his outstretched hands. The fire span around rapidly before taking the shape of a snarling fox. It gave a silent howl before racing forwards into the wooden log that he had stolen from the Research and Development Division. An explosion erupted when the fox made contact with the log. When it settled down, Naruto grinned when he saw the destroyed log. He had done it. He had been able to do it. Granted, he still needed to practice as it was still not at full power and he wanted to not have to say the incantation in battle. He watched fascinated as the parts of the log glowed before moving together again. When it was done, the log looked like it was in perfect order. Glad I took that from the research department, otherwise I would have to continue to find and make more targets. He stood before looking around. He was in a large barren valley. He had stumbled upon it while searching for a training ground to train in secret. Same place that Yoruichi takes Ichigo for Bankai training. He came here to train in his Shikai and in his Kido spells. It also had a spa, healing bath behind a large boulder. After having a soak in it, he discovered that it healed his wounds even faster than his unnatural healing abilities. Naruto shivered. He remembered when Miyuri Kuretsuchi, the captain of the 12th Division, found out about his healing ability. He had come looking for him and had wanted to dissect him to learn how it worked. Fortunately, or unfortunately in Miyuri's case, he was able to get to Hitsugaya Taicho before he was able to get his hands on him. Though it took me 5 hours to get that creep off my trail long enough to get to Hitsugaya Taicho. Naruto thought as he got out of the spa bath. Once he was dressed, he headed back to the 10th Division. As he headed back, he let his mind wander. It had been a week after that party that Rangaku had dragged him to. Not much had happened in that time. He had mostly been training. Though, he had been able to get Rangaku some sake when she was cooped up in her office. He was also able to pull a few pranks on the division. It was funny to see Hitsugaya Taicho walk around the division with pink hair and not notice for 2 hours. Naruto thought as grin appeared on his face as he remembered Toshiro walk around the division with bright neon pink hair. Everyone held in the division held their breath when they saw him but burst out laughing after he was out of earshot. He only found out about it when Yukataki Taicho commented on it when he came over to deliver some reports and chat. That was fun. Though running from a mad Toshiro throwing ice dragons at you is not. Naruto thought, remembering how Toshiro had chased him around the division using his Zanpakuto on him. Naruto was snapped out of his thoughts. He felt a small body walk into him. He looked down to see Yachiru Kusajishi, the lieutenant of the 11th Division. He had seen and met here a few times and found her to be a cute and mischievous girl. Though he knew never to anger her, as he had seen what happened when Akaku Madarame made her maid. She turned serious and her pink Ryotsu formed into an angry, giant, cat. I never figured out what Akaku-san did to make Yachiru-chan angry. Naruto thought before turning his attention on the small, but powerful girl. Hello Yachiru-chan. Sorry about that. Are you okay? Naruto asked as he helped her up. The cheerful girl nodded as him with her big, innocent smile in place, like always. Yes. Thank you Whisker-chan. Do you know where Ken-chan is? Naruto smiled at her before closing his eyes and concentrating on Kenpachi Zaraki's spiritual pressure. After a few seconds he was able to sense it at the 11th Division barracks. Yes Yachiru-chan. It looks like he is at the 11th Division. Would you like me to escort you? After shouting, yeah, and, yes, she jumped up and grabbed onto his shoulders, like he had seen her do to her captain, father. Naruto could not stop the grin from forming on his face. She was just so cute and her happiness was infectious. As he walked he turned to his temporary companion before asking, Hey Yachiru-chan, why are not with Kenpachi Taicho? I have never really seen you apart from him. She answered with her usual cheerfulness. Ken-chan asked me to deliver a report to Gramps while he was fighting some new members. Naruto nodded his head and looked back in front of him to see that they had arrived. Well Yachiru-chan, I guess I will see you some other time. Have fun, okay? She nodded before jumping down. She walked to the entrance before stopping and turning back to Naruto who was looking at her in confusion. She walked back to him before looking at him. Whisker-chan, can you come with me? I am sure Ken-chan would like to meet you. Naruto smiled and nodded as he followed her inside. On the inside was a different matter. He was sweating and paling rapidly. He did not want to meet Kenpachi Zaraki. At least, not until he was sure that he could fight him to a draw. As he was sure that Kenpachi would challenge him to a fight. Before he could come up with a plan to escape his fate, he heard Yakiru cry out, "Ken-chan." Before rushing off and jumping on said person's shoulders. "Ah, Yachiru, what took you so long?" She jumped up and down on his shoulder in happiness. "I met Whisker-chan on my way back." Naruto started to sweat when Kenpachi turned his attention on him. He resisted the urge to fidget when Kenpachi studied him with his one eye. After 5 minutes he started to feel uncomfortable. "So you are the one that Toshiro Taicho believes can become a captain." Naruto's eyes widened at that. Hitsugaya never said anything about that to him. He looked back at Kenpachi when he felt his spiritual pressure increase. He saw that Yachiru was about 30 feet away and Kenpachi had drawn his sword. He was only able to think, "Mommy," before he was forced to block his own Zanpakuto. Naruto felt his knees buckle when the old-looking sword smashed into his with tremendous force, but he refused to fall. Pulling his strength out, he pushed Kenpachi back before jumping away and calling out his sword's name. Oinari, Fox Goddess. His rose-colored spiritual power increased before blinding his opponent momentarily. When it died down, Kenpachi saw Naruto's new Zanpakuto. Kenpachi let a crazy grin come onto his face before crying out and slashing towards Naruto's direction. The force from his slash sent a wave of yellow spiritual power rushing at Naruto. When it got to him, an explosion rocked the division. Kenpachi frowned in disappointment. He had figured with the way that Toshiro had talked about him he would be a challenge. His frown soon turned back into his crazy grin after the dust cleared. Surrounding Naruto was a rose-colored, transparent barrier. "Kurenai in Shu, Crimson Dome," Naruto stated as it loaded before disappearing completely. Before Kenpachi could do anything else though, he saw the tails that were attached to the kid's pommel fan out behind him. He saw that there were 9 of them now that he could count them. The tips of the tails pointed towards him before the kid spoke. Hado 54. Abolishing flames. Purple fire appeared at the tip of each tail. It swirled before it fired at the 11th Division's captain. When the smoke cleared, Naruto frowned. "I had thought that that would have done more damage." Kenpachi stood relatively unharmed. His upper cloths were destroyed and he had a few burn marks, but was utterly fine. "What the hell? What are you doing using them sissy spells for, boy? Real men fight with combat." Naruto looked at him like he was crazy, which he might be, a little at least. Before Naruto could answer his question, Zaraki sped towards him at surprising speed for someone of his size. Naruto blocked and parried where he could and even had his tails try to stab him as well, but he still could not get a strike on the strong captain. Kenpachi on the other hand was slowly but surely starting to tire him, and he knew that if he did nothing fast he would lose. He knew that he would lose from the start, but there was no way that he was going down this bad. "You will lose, my beloved," his beloved spirit said to him as he continued to block and parry. "I know that, but I don't have the strength yet to beat him. With more training I could, but as I am now I cannot." He felt her smile at him before she spoke. "Good, my beloved, you know that you have limits, but you have yet to ask me for help. I can loan you my power. And you never told me this earlier because," Naruto thought as he dodged a swipe that would have made him a headless corpse. "You had never had a need for that knowledge, but I believe that you will need it much more in the future." Naruto nodded as he stopped Kenpachi in a deadlock with their respected swords crossed. Naruto thought as he stared into Zaraki's crazed but slightly disappointed eyes. He glared into his eyes as he resolved strengthened. "I would like your help, my beloved. Please lend me your strength." His spirit nodded before he felt new and powerful strength flow into his body. He pushed Kenpachi away and shunned Piyot away from him. He saw Kenpachi grin before hearing him speak. "So you are strong. Though I wonder where this new strength came from. Oh well, more fun for me." With that said, he grabbed his eye patch and pulled it off. Yellow spiritual pressure exploded off of Kenpachi's form, but Naruto remained unfazed. "My strength comes from my bond with my Zanpakuto. She has given me her power to increase my own." Kenpachi did not lose his grin as he said, "Well, good for you. I though fight by myself, as my sword has no name." When he finished, his Ryotsu formed a yellow skull above his head. Naruto's Ryotsu too formed a shape. A rose-colored fox head snarled at the skull and Kenpachi. The opponents stared at each other before they rushed at each other, knowing that this would decide who won. Their swords clashing, creating an explosion. When the dust died down, the crowd, that had gathered after Naruto released his sword, saw Kenpachi standing above Naruto. His Zanpakuto had returned to its sealed state and was lying next to Naruto. Everyone saw that he had a large gash on his chest that added to his already numerous cuts and slashed skin. Kenpachi only had one injury. A result of their final clash, as Naruto was not able to cut him during their fight. A big gash was clearly visible going from his left shoulder to his right hip. "Congrats, brat," Kenpachi said as he sheathed his sword and started to walk away. "You will be one of the few who will be able to leave me with a permanent scare." As he walked to the 4th division, Toshiro and Rangaku were one of the first to reach Naruto. They saw that he was already healing, so nothing was life-threatening. It would probably keep him in the 4th division for a while. They gently lifted him and then with the same gentleness set him down on one of the portable tables. Once they had seen him off with rest Hana, they headed back to their barracks to wait for their friend to get better. Naruto was awoken to the hustle and bustle of the 4th division several days later. He sat up, after making sure that he could move fine, and looked towards his door. It was open and he could see all the squad was running around doing various things. He looked around and found his clothes with his sword lying on top of them, which was laying on his bedside table. After getting dressed, he used Shunpo to get to his own division. Once he arrived, he headed towards his captain's room, though he did take notice that everyone seemed to be getting ready for something. I will find out from the captain. With that though, Naruto opened his captain's door and entered. He saw that Toshiro was working on some paperwork as he looked over the daily reports. Naruto cleared his throat and had to stop himself from laughing when Toshiro practically fell out of his seat. "Ah, Naruto-san, I see that you have woken up. You gave us a scare. You have been asleep for 4 days." Naruto's eyes widened before he shook it off. "Sorry about that, Taicho. Could you tell what all the hubbub is about?" Hitsugaya nodded before explaining. "Yesterday some Ryoka invaded Soul Society. One of them defeated one of the Gate Guardians, Jidanbo Akanzaka. He had Shinigami powers. We also believe that one of them is a Quincy. We believe that there are 4 Ryoka with some other people helping them. As of right now we are trying to find them." Naruto nodded as he took in the new information. He soon let out a quiet groan so that his captain could not hear him. "Captain, is there a description of the kid with Shinigami powers?" Hitsugaya nodded before reading off the description that was given to him earlier that morning. When he finished, Naruto did not bother to hide his groan. "Great. I hate it when I am right. Oh, well, maybe I can get a good fight." "Is there anything that you want me to do, Captain?" Naruto asked after thinking for a moment. Hitsugaya thought for a moment before answering. "No, not right now. For now all we can do is wait for the Ryoka to show themselves again." Naruto before bowing and leaving to his room. When Naruto arrived, he set his blade down on his table and unceremonial flopped down on his bed. As he let his body rest some more, he let his mind wander. "I wonder what I should do. I guess I could train, but I want to find a way to save Rukia-chan from being executed. I could try to help the Ryoka, but even with my strength I won't be able to do much. My fight with Kenpachi Taicho showed me that I still have much more to learn." Naruto was knocked out of his thoughts by a familiar soft and gentle hand cupping his cheek. He leaned into it as he opened his eyes. He was met with the sight of Oinari's beautiful crimson eyes that shone with worry. Naruto smiled at her as he sat up. Once she sat down next to him with her head resting on his shoulder. He unconsciously ran his hand through her crimson locks. He stopped though when she spoke. "What do you wish to do, Naruto-kun?" Naruto frowned as he thought over what he wanted to do about this. "I am not sure, Oinari-chan. I want to save Rukia-chan, but I do not have the strength to do so. I could help the Ryoka, but if they fail then I will have to leave Soul Society." A frown appeared on the Crimson Goddess's face. She stood up, making Naruto look up at her with confusion in his eyes, before facing him and cupping both his cheeks. She stared deep into his eyes as she spoke to him. "You know that I will always be with you, Naruto-kun. I will stand with you no matter what you decide. I believe though, that you should follow what your heart says." Her voice was gentle yet firm, harsh but caring. Naruto nodded slowly as he let her words sink in. Once they did, his eyes glowed red, familiar to Oinari's yet different at the same time, as he hardened his resolve. I will have to wait for the right moment or excuse to train in peace. Then I will save Rukia-chan and if possible help the Ryoka. If I am right, Ichigo came here to save Rukia-chan. Oinari smiled brightly, something that Naruto would never tire of, before giving him a gentle as she faded back to his inner world. Once he felt her return back in his inner world, he laid back down and let his mind wander. He let sleep claim its hold on him with one thought running through his head. I hope my chance comes soon. 2 days later, Naruto, along with everyone in Seirei, watched as a blue sphere crashed in the barrier made by the Sekiseki, spirit-reducing stone, that circled Seirei. The sphere slowly passed through the barrier, but, before it went farther than 10 feet, it exploded. 6 comets flew out of the cloud that had formed and shot out in different directions. Naruto let a grin appear on his face. This was his chance. If he could somehow get his captain to let him go out and hunt the Ryoka, he could go train instead. Before Naruto could follow through on this, though, he saw a hell butterfly flies down towards him. He held up his finger and let it land on it so it could deliver its message. All captains and lieutenants are to report for a meeting room. I also want Naruto Uzumaki to attend. Naruto groaned before using Shunpo to arrive at the meeting room faster. Once he arrived at the door, he knocked and waited for permission to enter. Even he knew better than to enter unannounced unless you had to deliver vital information or news. Once he heard the voice of the old man, not that he would say that to his face, he entered. He walked forward and stopped right in front of the captain's 2 lines with the captain general on the other side on his chair. The lieutenants were standing behind their respected captains. The general slammed his cane down on the floor to quiet everyone before speaking. As you all know, Ryoka have invaded Seirei. Kuretsuchi Taicho has detected 6 Ryoka. I want all 5 seats and lower to track down these Ryoka and capture them, or if you cannot, eliminate them. Everyone nodded somberly except for a select few. Cough Kuretsuchiko. Now then, are there any questions? Naruto hesitantly raised his hand. The general shot him a knowing glacé before nodding. Why was I called here, sir? I have called you here, old captain rumbled, because I have read your report from your mission to the human world. I have, as you know, everyone 5th seat and lower out looking for these Ryoka, and I believe that you have the best chance to successes without killing them. I want you to capture these intruders if you cannot. Here his voice turned somber. You are to eliminate them. Naruto's eyes widened before he nodded his head slowly. The general nodded as well before continuing. I want you to search for them until you have found them or captured one. You are dismissed. Naruto nodded once more before turning and leaving the room. As he walked, he thought over what he had been told. Well, at least these kids, at least I think that they are all kids, can take care of themselves. Since the captain general only assigns someone to hunt down Ryoka if they are dangerous or a pain to Seirei. The good thing about this is that I can train uninterrupted. I can achieve the next release, Bankai. With that thought in mind, Naruto turned and headed towards the secret valley that he had made his own. Once he arrived, he saw that it looked just like he left it. He walked towards the center and then materialized Oinari in front of him. He smiled at her and she returned it. Now Naru-kun, Oinari began after thinking a moment. Before we begin, I must see if you are able to achieve Bankai in the amount of time we have, or if I will have to postpone it till later. Naruto nodded before saying, I am ready. I hope you are Naru-kun. With that thought, she pulled Naruto into his inner world. Inner world. When Naruto opened his eyes, he looked around confused before spotting Oinari sitting in her favorite seat, a branch halfway up the tree. He walked up to the trunk of the tree before looking up at Oinari and asking, Hey Oinari-chan, what are we doing here? I thought you were going to test me. Said spirit nodded before dropping down in front of him. I brought you here to take your test. You will be fighting yourself. Naruto raised a sun-ed eyebrow in confusion. Oinari giggled before explaining. It's just like I said, he is your opposite yet he is you and vice versa. Naruto nodded before saying, Alright, I understand, I think, go ahead and call him out. Oinari nodded before part of her red dress seemed to ripple as pieces of Ryotsu separated from her and then started to take a different form. When it was done, Naruto saw that the person looked exactly like him, except there were a few differences. His white skin and hair seemed to shine in the sunlight of his inner world. His double's attire was the same as his, but the colors were reversed. Naruto saw his eyes snap open and saw that they were completely different than his. His sclera was black along with his pupil while his irises were gold. "Ah, it good to be out at last." His voice was like his but higher and filled with bloodlust and anticipation. Naruto tensed ever so slightly as he saw that he too had Oinari tied to his waist. His double looked around before his eyes landed on Naruto. Naruto visibly tensed when a grin filled with the lust for battle appeared on his twin's face. "So the king has decided to pay me a visit. Who are you?" Naruto asked, slightly freaked out. It was like he was talking to Kenpachi, but only he was crazier. The white Naruto gave a dark chuckle. "Me? I am you. Only you could say that I am your darker half and instincts." Naruto nodded it before turning to Oinari, who was sitting on her branch watching them, before asking, "So I just have to beat him?" She nodded. Naruto turned towards his opponent before letting a grin cross his face that looked eerie, similar to his clone's. "Well, shall we begin? I want to start learning Bankai and I could use a good fight." His clone, who had been caught off guard by his grin, chuckled before it turned into full-blown-out laughter. He spoke once he regained control of himself. "You are interesting, King. All right, let's see what you got." Both unsheathed their swords before staring at each other. All of a sudden they shouted out in unison. "Pure. Oinari." Red Ryotsu poured off Naruto along with his clone. Though there was a difference with that as well. While Naruto's was the same beautiful crimson red as Oinari's eyes, Haruto's was a more violet red that had a dark feel to it. Once the energy faded away, it showed both of them in their Shikai state. The two stared at each other before they exploded into action using Shunpo. Naruto's red blade met his opponent's more violet red as they fought for dominance. His clone, Haruto as Naruto now called him, used his Shikai's ability and hardened the tails that came out of his own sword and ordered them to impale his opponent. Naruto dodged with Shunpo before reappearing a few meters away from Haruto. Hado 86. Blazing Fire, Fox's Rage. Fire gathered in front of Naruto's 9 tails before taking the form of foxes. The fire foxes silently howled before shooting towards Haruto. Haruto grinned as he watched the fire animals rush him before saying his own Kido spell. Hado 87. Adamantine Blast. Fireballs appeared in front of Haruto's own tails before shooting towards Naruto's own spell. The two fire spells collided with each other, creating an explosion. Naruto looked towards the smoke cloud with his muscles tensed, ready to move at any moment. To his slight surprise, he saw the 9 fireballs that Haruto fired coming towards him. Naruto quickly shunned Pioed to avoid it before blocking a strike to his head from Haruto. As Naruto and Haruto went into a match of Zanjutsu, Haruto spoke up. "You're not too bad, King. Maybe now I can get a good fight before I take your crown." Naruto grinned at him before speaking after landing a kick to his chest. "Of course I am. You should know. If that Kido spell was anything to go by, you have all my knowledge and skill, and if you want my crown, come and take it." Haruto chuckled as he shunned Pioed in front of Naruto and thrusted towards his chest. Naruto parried the blow and struck out at Haruto's shoulder. Haruto jumped back but was unable to completely dodge the attack. Evident on the cut that he now sported. Haruto just laughed in excitement before rushing towards Naruto. Naruto grinned as he parried and went to slash at Haruto's midsection. Haruto say this though, and used Shunpo to dodge before swinging his sword in an arc towards Naruto. Shinku Aranami, Deep Crimson Raging Wave. Naruto's eyes widened as a crimson Ryotsu wave shot towards him from Haruto's blade. Haruto grinned as he saw the attack connect with Naruto, resulting in a big smoke cloud. Haruto grinned wider when the smoke cleared. He chuckled as he spoke. "So you were able to use Kurenai and Shu, Crimson Dome, in time to block. Good job, King. I thought my fight was already over." Indeed, Naruto had had time to raise the dome in the nick of time. He dismissed the dome, with the same grin on his face, before using Shunpo to appear in front of his double. He grabbed hold of his shirt before ordering his tails to attack Haruto, who responded in kind but also slashed at Naruto's midsection. Naruto blocked with his sword but was unable to block the punch to his face from Haruto's other hand. The hit knocked him away from his opponent, which gave him time to charge a spell. Bakudo 30. Break Piercing Triple Beam. A golden triangle appeared in front of Naruto's double before 3 fangs appeared on each corner. He fired the binding spell at Naruto, who had regained his footing, and pinning him to a tree. Naruto easily broke out of the Kido, as he practiced breaking and using all the spells he learned, but it gave enough time to use one of his deadlier spells. Hado 89. Grand Ray Icy Blast. This time the spell appeared on his tails. Once charged, Haruto released the deadly Kido, launching a large blizzard of snow and wind. As the Kido spell approached him, Naruto used Shunpo to the dodge. When Naruto appeared a few meters farther from the battle, showing that he had taken a few injuries from the destructive spell, Naruto turned on instinct and blocked Haruto's strike. I need to end this soon. If this keeps up, I might not be able to win. Naruto though, as he continued to block Haruto's assault and get in a few slashes or scratches. Suddenly an idea popped up in his head. It was risky, but if it worked he would win. Naruto quickly set to work on his plan by slashing at Haruto's head, forcing him to jump back to dodge. Naruto jumped away as well before he began charging up for what he hoped would decide the battle. Once he had charged up the Shinku Aranami, instead of releasing it though, he kept the power of the attack in his blade. He raced towards Haruto, who had done the same thing once he saw his king do it as well. The power continued to build up in the sword as they raced towards each other until there was a loud screaming noise coming from the vibrating swords. Once they were close enough, they swung with all their might, instinctively knowing that this would decide the battle. The blades met a swirling vortex of chaotic Ryotsu. Oinari, who had been watching the fight from the very beginning, shielded her eyes. Once it died down, she looked over towards the battlefield with worry clearly visible in her beautiful crimson eyes. Once they smoke cleared though, she let a breath out that she did not know that she had been holding. There in the middle of a giant crater stood Naruto and Haruto, with the former slowly disappearing back into spiritual particles. Haruto looked down at the sword that had pierced his heart before looking at his king's face. Naruto had a satisfied grin on his face though, it looked like he was holding back a grimace. Haruto looked at his own sword, which he had slashed into Naruto's side, before grinning back at his king. You did good, king, but know this. He placed his hand onto Oinari's blade before continuing. I will be back one day, and when that day comes I will take your crown. So grow stronger so that I can have a good fight before I enjoy my new body. With that the last of him disappeared back to Oinari, who had appeared when Haruto was talking. She smiled at Naruto, who had fallen to the ground wearing a smile on his face. You did well, Naru-kun. Once you are rested we will begin your Bankai training. If possible. Naruto's grin got bigger, as if he had heard her. Naruto groaned as consciousness returned to his mind. He slowly opened his eyes as the light that shined down into the valley was just as bright as the sun. He looked himself over and saw that all of his cloths had been fixed from his battle with Haruto. He looked up when he heard the sound of Oinari materializing. She smiled at him and he returned it before standing up. Once Oinari saw that he was up, she spoke. Well, my beloved, you did pass the test and I told you that we would begin your Bankai training. Please follow me. With that she turned around and led him to a big area free of rocks that Naruto knew was not there yesterday. She stood in the middle and Naruto joined her. She smiled at him before turning serious, which made Naruto serious as well, as she was almost never serious. Now Naruto paid her his complete and full attention to her now, as in all the time he had known her she had never used his name without a suffix or their pet names for each other. In order for you to gain my Bankai release you must pass my test. If you pass, then you will gain my Bankai. You will have until Rukia's execution to pass my test. Do you accept? Naruto thought over it before he nodded his head with determination clear in his sapphire eyes. She smiled before saying in a sweet and innocent voice, you have to beat me in an all-out fight. Naruto paled rapidly to where his skin turned pure white. Oinari burst out laughing at his expression, which gained her a glare from Naruto. Once she calmed down and Naruto's color returned, though he still looked a little pale, she explained further. Now we will fight until you can beat me. If you do not beat me within the time limit, then we will postpone Bankai training. Do you understand? Naruto nodded. Oinari smiled before she turned on her heels and walked to the edge of the clearing. Naruto did the same, but, for the opposite side. Naruto withdrew his Zanpakuto as Oinari materialized the same sword in her hand, though it was already in Shikai mode. Naruto held his sword in a loving manner before calling out, "Purr, Oinari." He was covered in his crimson-red spiritual power before it disappeared, showing his Shikai. Naruto nodded at Oinari, which she returned, before they entered a stare down. Both, looking for a weak spot to attack and exploit. Suddenly Oinari disappeared from his vision. On instinct he whirled around and blocked Oinari's sword slash that was aimed at his midsection. Before he could do anything, Oinari moved one of her tails and pointed it at him. Hado 31. Shot of red fire. The red ball of spiritual energy gathered at the tip of the tail before it shot between the short distance between them. When the smoke cleared, it showed Oinari unharmed and Naruto lying on his back with burn marks on his body some feet away. "You still hesitate, beloved," Oinari said as she slowly walked towards Naruto. "You must fight all out and without hesitation if you want to beat me." Naruto slowly stood up and faced her. His grip on his sword tightened as he breathed in and out slowly before he looked up with his eyes giving off a light red glow. Oinari gave a small smile when she saw it. Her smile vanished and she turned serious though when he disappeared using Shunpo and appeared in front of her, aiming to separate her upper and lower half apart. She parried the blow and aimed a slash at his gut. He used Shunpo to dodge it and appeared behind her, aiming to take off her head. She ducked and nailed a kick to his chest, sending him several feet away from her. He twisted in midair and landed on his feet with all 9 tails pointed at her. Hado 32. Yellow fire flash. The 9 yellow fire spells shot towards her as she raised her hand before saying calmly, "Kurenai and Chu, Crimson Dome." The red dome surrounded her just in the nick of time to shield her from Naruto's attack. As she lowered her defense, she heard Naruto's voice from behind her. "Freeze even the coldest of ice, chill the coldest of soul. Come forth mighty ice storm and do thigh-biting." Hado 93. Glacier vapor storm. Oinari looked behind her and saw Naruto with herself stabbed into the ground next to him, holding his hands out in front of him, his palms facing her. Ice exploded from Naruto's outstretched palms and it grew bigger as it neared Oinari. Her eyes widened as she saw the ice become as big a medium-sized house. Before she could do anything, the ice made contact with her goddess-like body, sending her rocketing back as the ice followed her and started to freeze parts of her body. Naruto dropped to one knee, breathing hard as he watched his spell crush Oinari into the surrounding rock wall, kicking up duck and rock. That had to do something. I put at least a fourth of my Ryotsu into that attack. When the smoke cleared, he saw that the attack had damaged his Zanpakuto spirit. Her kimono, which used to be a luscious crimson and looked like the gods themselves had made it, was now ripped and torn up. She also had many scratches and bruises on her perfectly tanned skin. Naruto also saw that her face was torn between pride and anger. Pride because he was able to hurt her, and anger before he had ruined her kimono, even though she could just fix it with a snap of her fingers. She still hated to see it damaged. Before they could continue with their fight, they detected an unfamiliar Ryotsu signature and one that was vaguely familiar to Naruto, but, for the life of him, he could not remember where he had felt it. They both turned towards the 2 signatures and soon heard 2 people arguing about something. "And I so could beat Byakuya," a male voice said that Naruto could not place. They heard a snort before another voice spoke up, and Naruto could tell that it was a female. "You would not last 5 seconds if you do not even have Bankai. So shut up. Besides, we came here so that you could gain your Bankai. So stop complaining." As they continued to argue, they slowly came closer to Naruto's position, as Oinari had left once it became clear that they could not continue. Once they passed the rock that was hiding them from his vision, he saw the human that he had met in the human world, Ichigo, along with someone he had only seen in pictures, Yoruichi Shiwan. Naruto paled rapidly once he saw her. While he knew that she could easily kill him, as his speed paled in comparison to the goddess of Flash, he was not going down with a fight though. "You?" Ichigo shouted once he saw that Yoruichi had stopped talking and had focused her attention elsewhere. He rocketed towards Naruto while pulling his cleaver, which Naruto just now noticed, from its cloth-like wrappings. Naruto though kept his attention on Yoruichi, which she noticed and pissed Ichigo off, not even paying Ichigo attention as he pointed one of his tails at Ichigo, as he had kept Oinari in her Shikai state. Bakudo 61. 6 rods prison of light. The 6 rods have slammed into Ichigo's torso, completely stopping his attack. Naruto kept his attention on Yoruichi as he spoke. "So it was true. You have regained your Shinigami powers. I thought I had destroyed them when I severed your soul sleep. I was able to regain my powers thanks to Hat and Clogs. You damn basted. Ichigo spoke with what sounded like pride in his voice. At least that is what Naruto thought it was. Naruto snorted before saying, "You should be lucky that it was me that severed your soul sleep instead of Byakuya Taicho. He would have severed your chain of fate as well, which would most likely have killed you." Naruto stopped though when he felt Ichigo's spiritual pressure increase before shattering his spell with his raw power. "Ah," Naruto spoke and he watched Ichigo break his Bakudo spell. "I see that you figured out one of the ways to break out of Bakudo 61. Ichigo seemed smug and he once again launched himself at Naruto. Naruto signed at seeing him do the same thing and expecting different results. His tail once again was locked on Ichigo's form as Naruto spoke calmly. Bakudo 63. Locking bondage stripes. Golden chains of spiritual energy appeared around Ichigo before they constricted him, binding him just as Naruto wanted. My, aren't you good at Kido?" Naruto's eyes widened before he quickly used Shunpo to get away from Yoruichi, who had been able to get behind him as he was dealing with Ichigo, who was still trying to get out of the Bakudo spell. He turned and looked at Yoruichi. He was able to see that she wore a backless, black sleeveless undershirt along with an orange overshirt with 2 white straps on each shoulder. A large beige sash around her waist. Black stretch pants and long beige wrist warmers, secured by bands, and long beige leg warmers with brown light shoes. Yoruichi grinned as he looked her up and down. She used Shunpo to get behind him and wrapped her arms around his neck as she pushed her large bust into his back. He blushed slightly as he turned to look at her, though Yoruichi could see that he did not blush as bad as most people would. It was as if this happened a lot to him. It was only confirmed with his next words. "If you plan to throw me off like that, Yoruichi Shiwan, then it won't work. Oinari does that enough to me that it does not even faze me." Yoruichi grin faded for a moment before it grew and gained a mischievous look in her eyes. She lowered her head and nibbled his right ear, and took great pleasure in the shiver that she could feel that traveled down his spine, before whispering in a husky, "Oh but, what if we both had our way with you?" Naruto's eyes glossed over as the countless images that her suggestion made come to mind with a grin on his face. A small amount of blood left his nose and he let out a small perverted giggle. Yoruichi grinned at this. At last she found someone willing to flirt with her, as most just stared at her and wanted in her pants. While he did stare at her when he first saw her, it was only to watch her as he knew about her reputation. "I like her, Naru-kun. I approve." Oinari spoke up, knocking Naruto out of his thoughts. Naruto raised an eyebrow. "You only like her because she acts like you." He felt Oinari grin, before he heard her whisper something to him. Yoruichi watched as the young man that she was holding zoned out. She believed that he was speaking to his Zanpakuto. After a few minutes she saw him glow red with his blush before he furiously tried to get it to go down. Yoruichi grinned. She had to meet his spirit and asked what it was that she said that made him glow red like that. She turned his attention back to him when he said, "Yoruichi-san, Oinari wants to ask you something. Can I call her out so you can talk?" Yoruichi thought for a moment. She knew that he was not an enemy, as if he would have attacked her and Ichigo and left to get back up. So she nodded at his question as she nuzzled his cheek. Naruto blushed slightly before he materialized Oinari. Once Oinari was done, she turned towards Yoruichi, who still had Naruto in her grasp, before AY and seductive appeared on her face. Naruto let out a groan when he saw it, because it usually meant that something Y was going to happen or she was going to have him hurrah. Yoruichi looked at him before turning her attention to the hot fox woman that appeared. "Just ignore him, Yoru-chan. Anyway, I came out here to ask you if you would like to carry out your idea." Yoruichi looked confused before she remembered what it was that she said to the hot blonde that she was holding. She grinned before saying, "Sure. I could always use some fun, but your partner has to take me on a date once this whole situation is over with, and then if I enjoy the date then we can." Oinari grinned before she nodded, then turned to Naruto, who was looking between the two goddesses, at least Naruto believed they were, and keeping his mouth shut as they talked, since Oinari hated to be interrupted unless it was important. He unfortunately found this out the hard way when she punched him clear across his inner world into a tree when he interrupted her when she was explaining about his only Shikai attack. She walked over to Naruto and gave him a deep. Naruto quickly responded and deepened the. Once they had to breathe, Oinari separated from Naruto and brought her face towards Yoruichi and gave her a deep as well, who had her eyes widened before getting into it. Naruto watched transfixed at the wonderful between two hot women that were in front of him. He was thanking whatever god or goddess that was watching over him for allowing him to watch this. When the two women separated, they gave seductive smiles to each other before Oinari faded back to his inner world with one sentence lingering in the winds for only him to hear. We will continue your Bankai training later, Naru-kun, so for now enjoy your time with the Y-Cat woman. Naruto could only sigh before he followed Yoruichi over towards Ichigo, who was unable to break the binding spell, though Naruto could tell that he had weakened it slightly. All right, Ichigo, Yoruichi spoke up once they were in front of him. You will not attack Naruto. He is not our enemy, so no fighting. What? He shouted. Yoruichi sighed. Listen, Ichigo, if Naruto-kun was our enemy, then he would have attacked us or went to get back up. She is right, Naruto added. As standard protocol, I would have to try and capture you or eliminate you if I could not, as the Captain General ordered me to. Naruto saw Yoruichi look at him in surprise before she shrugged it off and looked at Ichigo with an elegant eyebrow raised. Ichigo sighed before he mumbled, fine. Yoruichi smiled before turning and nodding at Naruto, who nodded back to her before releasing the binding spell. When the golden chains were gone, Ichigo wrapped his cleaver and put it back onto his back. Once that was done, he turned to Yoruichi and asked, alright, so now how are we going to do this? Well, Yoruichi explained with her finger tapping her chin, Urahara has given me this to help you out with your Bankai. She pulled out a white humanoid-shaped thing that looked like a cardboard cutout. Urahara made this to forcefully pull out your Zanpakuto spirit into the real world. Now while you can do this willingly, it usually takes decades or centuries, and we do not have that kind of time. Naruto looked eye-wide at that. He did not know that it was able to materialize Oinari about a week after he first released his sword, though she was still transparent. He was able to make her solid after a few months. All you have to do is stab this with your Zanpakuto. Be warned though, you only have 3 days to complete this. So think this through. Before she could finish, Ichigo had stabbed the cutout. This is the only way to achieve Bankai in time to save Rukia, then I will do it. I will rescue her. His spiritual pressure flared and flashed before it died down to show an old man in a tattered black garb with black sunglasses. Yoruichi turned to the old man. Since you are out now, Zangetsu, I will leave the test up to you, and good luck, Ichigo. Zangetsu nodded before slamming his hand onto the ground. Nothing happened after a few minutes, but they felt the ground shake before countless and different swords erupted out of the ground. As Zangetsu began to explain his test to Ichigo, Naruto told Yoruichi that he was going to go start his own Bankai training. Yoruichi nodded before saying, alright, I will come get you when Ichigo has to take a break so that you can as well. Naruto nodded and thanked her before he went some ways off and then summoned Oinari. She grinned as she summoned Shi's sword, and Naruto unsheathed his own sword. Soon they exploded into action, planning to finish this in time to save Rukia. Several hours later, Yo Naruto came over here. Ichigo is done training for the day, so come take your own break. Alright. As Naruto slowly walked over, as to not irritate his wounds, he sheathed his sword. Once he arrived, he saw Yoruichi sitting on a rock next to a hot spring, which was occupied by Ichigo. When Yoruichi saw his, she pointed to it and said, go ahead and get in. The water has special properties that will heal you faster. Naruto nodded as he walked behind a large rock to take off his clothes. Once he was finished, he quickly got into the spring. Once in, he was able to see that she was telling the truth about the water. He could see his wounds close even faster than they usually would. How is the water, guys? Yoruichi asked as Ichigo drank some of the water. Great, thanks for this, Yoruichi-san. Ichigo spoke up and Naruto nodded as he sank lower into the water. That's good. I might as well join you, she said as she began to strip, and Ichigo took another gulp full of water. He then proceeded to spit it out as he cried out in surprise before saying, what? Oh, relax, Ichigo. It not like you have not seen anything like it. Ichigo started to sputter while Naruto watched Yoruichi take off her clothes. His eyes were glued to her as she slowly removed them. Ichigo, though, continued to be a sputtering mess with his hands covering his eyes. He heard a small splash and peeked through his eyes to see Yoruichi, in her cat form. Is this better, Ichigo? Naruto, though, glared at Ichigo. What is wrong with you? You have a goddess right in front of you and you don't want to see. Naruto said as he continued to glare at Ichigo. Yoruichi, though, was glad that she was in her cat form since it was able to hide her blush. That is unless. Naruto trailed off as his eyes widened as he looked at Ichigo. Suddenly he pointed at Ichigo and shouted, "You are gay." "I am not gay," Ichigo shouted as he glared at Naruto. Naruto didn't believe him and slowly moved away from him. Yoruichi, though, was watching this with a grin on her face. "Then why do you not want to see Yoruichi-chan?" This reduced Ichigo to a sputtering mess. Naruto looked at him surprised at how easy it was to embarrass before his eyes widened in realization. "You're a virgin." Ichigo's face turned bright red and he began to yell at Naruto while Yoruichi started laughing. Once they calmed down, though Ichigo still threw a glare at Naruto once in a while, they began to relax in the spa before heading to sleep. The 6 panels of light slammed into Oinari's midsection before he once again used Shunpo to get right next to her. He raised his sword before bringing it down in an overhead swing. However, in the time it took him to get there was enough time for her to break out and block before using all 9-tailed to smash into his gut. It knocked the wind out of him and allowed the fox goddess to deliver a punch to his face, rocketing him into the wall. He let out another grunt as he pulled himself out of the wall. He raised his sword to continue, but Oinari sheathed her sword before walking over to him. "That is enough for now, Naru-kun. We will continue in 5 minutes, so rest." Naruto nodded before he laid against the wall as his sword returned to its sealed state. As his energy returned to him, he turned to watch Ichigo fight against his own Zanpakuto spirit. An old man with a tattered black cloak and wavy black hair. He also wore sunglasses and had a small amount of facial hair. The old man, or Zangetsu as he learned he was called, had made a different test that he was to pass. Ichigo had to find his Bankai sword, or his sword that was made to fight, and beat him with it. Naruto though liked his own test though, as it was easier to do. As he only had to beat Oinari in an all-out fight. While Ichigo had to fight him while also finding his Bankai. So yay, he liked his test better. Naruto turned to his spirit, but, before he could speak, a small explosion interrupted him. He, along with everyone else, looked at the smoke cloud. They tensed as they heard someone coming towards them. Once the cloud disappeared though, Naruto grinned. "Renji, how did you find this place?" Naruto asked his friend as he walked over. Renji grinned at him as well before saying, "I followed you here one day and I train here when you don't." Naruto nodded before asking, "So what are you here for?" Naruto frowned when Renji turned serious. The Central 46 have moved up Rukia's execution. Naruto turned serious as well and he saw that Ichigo had a serious look on as well. "When is it now?" Renji hesitated and Naruto felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. "Tomorrow." Naruto's and Ichigo's eyes widened before their faces fell. The other looked at them with concern before Naruto silently released his Zanpakuto. They both looked up. Naruto's eyes glowed a rose color, like his Ryotsu, while Ichigo's glowed blue, like his own Ryotsu. They then spoke as one. "Then I will attain Bankai today." With that, Naruto charged towards Oinari while Ichigo picked up a new sword before charging Zangetsu. As the 4 fought, Renji turned to Yoruichi. "Do you think we can do it?" Yoruichi nodded as she watched the 2 boys fight their Zanpakuto spirits. "Yes, if you train like these 2 then you 3 will attain Bankai. At least I believe you all will." Renji nodded before saying, "Well then, I better get started." With that he walked off as a baboon with a snake for a tail appeared next to him. Yoruichi watched him go before she chuckled. Yes, these 3 will go far, especially Naruto-kun and Ichigo. Yes, she knew those 2 would go far. She could feel their immense spiritual power, though Naruto had a much better control over his. She still had to say that he had a larger amount than Ichigo. Though, that might change later on when Ichigo gains the ability to use his mask. She knew that Ichigo was a wizard as Kazuki told her about the mask that had appeared on his face when he came out of the shaft. Once he had control of that he would be able to beat Naruto. If only she knew that Naruto was also a wizard and the power that his own hollow mask would give him. Break. We are here today for the execution of Rukia Kuchiki for giving her powers to a human. Do you have any last wishes? The captain commander rumbled as he looked at Rukia, who was standing in front of a large wooden structure. In 2 lines behind them stood several captains and lieutenants. The captains who came to the execution were the captain commander himself, as was mandatory, Soifun, Retsu Yunohana, Byakuya Kuchiki, and Shunsui Kyoraku. Along with these captains were their lieutenants Chojiro Sasaki, Marichio Ome, Izan Katetsu, and Naneo Eyes. Yes, Captain. Rukia said. Break, hold up you bastard. We all can't fly. Ichigo yelled at Naruto, who was floated up above him as they headed towards Sokyoku Hill, as Yoruichi went ahead of them. Naruto chuckled as he said, well then boy, you need to learn, and didn't Yoru-chan give you that cloak that lets you fly, at least until you learn that is. Naruto chuckled again when Ichigo turned slightly red, as he had forgotten about it in his anger at Naruto. Shut up, he called out as he grabbed the cloak before putting it on. Oh come on, are you still mad that I beat you? You see, once Naruto and Ichigo had learned Bankai, they decided to fight each other to get used to their Bankai at least a little before running off to fight. In that fight Ichigo learned something very important. Experience wins against potential every time. Naruto won both fights they had though. Naruto had to say that Ichigo and he both had interesting Bankai. Yoruichi had said that she had not seen anything like them, especially Naruto's. Though Naruto was slightly put off when she said it made him look cute. He was not cute, damn it. Of course not. I am mad that you rubbed it in my face. Naruto only chuckled before turning serious. We better hurry, they should be starting soon. Ichigo turned serious too before nodding and rising into the sky. Let's go. With that they flew to Sokyoku Hill. Break. Very well, your request will be done. Rukia smiled at the commander as she felt a weight lifted off her chest. That is cruel. Izan said. It is not, Izan, Yunohana spoke up. If the commander had told her that he would have to deny her request, her would not be able to die in peace. This way she is able to die in peace. Izan nodded slowly before turning back to the general. The commander nodded at the four people surrounding the Sokyoku, which was a large halberd. The four nodded back before they began saying a chant. When it was finished, the ropes evaporated as Rukia was raised up to the top of the gate by 3 blocks that held her in a crucified stance. The captains and lieutenants watched as Ryotsu exploded from the halberd along with fire. Before long it took the form of a giant phoenix. The phoenix let out a loud cry before charging at Rukia, with its beak aimed at her heart. Rukia closed her eyes and waited for death to take her, as he had made peace with herself. After several seconds of not feeling anything, she hesitantly opened her eyes. They however flew open when she spotted Ichigo blocking the phoenix with his huge cleaver. Yo! Rukia stared in disbelief before it turned to anger. You idiot! Are you truly a fool? There are captains here. You will die here if you do not stop this. Ichigo opened his mouth to say something but was interrupted by another familiar voice. Come on, Rukia-chan. You should know the rules of Soul Society better than anyone. You should have known that the commander was lying to you. They were going to kill all the Ryoka and traitors. Rukia turned to see Naruto Uzumaki floating next to her. He smiled at her before turning and looking at the phoenix that and reared back to try again. Naruto watched as Ichigo prepared to take on the phoenix when Naruto sensed a familiar spiritual pressure. A small smile appeared on his face when a black rope wrapped around the flaming bird before hitting the ground again. Naruto, Ichigo, and Rukia looked down and saw Jashiro Yukitake and Shunsui Kyoraku holding a shield that had the Shiwan family symbol on it with their swords in 2 slots on the shield. Before anyone could do anything, spiritual power from both of the captains raced up to the bird before vanquishing the flames and returning the weapon back to its sealed form. Ichigo used the distraction to flip over to the beam that was above Rukia. He pulled out his sword and raised it above his head. Before Rukia could protest, Ichigo thrusted his sword into the wood. Spiritual power exploded from him and destroyed the beam and Rukia's restarts. Once it died down, Naruto saw that Ichigo now held Rukia on his shoulder. I told you I was going to save you, no matter what. Now just shut up and deal with it. A small smile came to Rukia's face before she muttered, idiot. Naruto let out a chuckle before sensing a familiar spiritual pressure. He along with Ichigo and Rukia turned and looked towards the ground to see a heavily bandaged Renji enter the clearing. Renji! Rukia called out in happiness and relief, as she had sensed his spiritual pressure fall dangerously low before she was taken to Sokyoku Hill. Naruto and Ichigo both were relived as well as they too had sensed the fall in his spiritual pressure. Hey Renji! Ichigo yelled out, drawing the attention of the captains and lieutenants who had been watching the captains of the 8th and 13th squads. Ichigo raised Rukia above his head while ignoring her question of what he was doing before yelling out, "Catch!" Renji's eyes widened when Ichigo proceeded to throw Rukia at him. He panicked slightly before opening his arms and catching her, which smashed them both into the ground. Once they had recovered, they got up and proceeded to yell at Ichigo. "What the yell do you think you are doing? What would have happened if I missed catching her, you idiot? I leave Rukia in your charge, Renji. Protect her with your life." Ichigo spoke up, interrupting their yelling. Renji nodded seriously before picking up Rukia bridal style, despite her protests, before quickly running away from the executing hill. "Well, what are you doing? I want all lieutenants after him. Bring back both of them," Soifun ordered when none of the lieutenants did anything. The lieutenants looked towards their captains for confirmation, which they nodded to before rushing after Renji. They did not get far, however, as Ichigo used Shunpo to appear in front of them with Naruto appearing behind him. The lieutenants quickly decided to release their Shikais in order to deal with, as they were confident that their numbers would put them at an advantage. "Crush, Jijetsubori, 5 heads," Marichio roared as his sword turned into a long chain with an oversized spiked ball attached to the end. "Bite, Gonryomaru, solemn spirit," Chojiro called out calmly as his sword turned in a rapier. "Run, Itagumo, frozen cloud," Izan called out as her sword grew 2 smaller blades out of the bottom of the blade at a 45-degree angle. With their Shikais activated, they charged at Ichigo with confidence. As they did so, Ichigo stabbed his sword into the ground before slamming his hand through Marichio's spiked ball and into his stomach, surprising and knocking him unconscious. Using the surprise created from him taking out Marichio so easily, he sent an uppercut to Chojiro's chin before sending a palm thrust to Izan's stomach, knocking them both out of the fight as well. "Show off," Naruto muttered as he watched Ichigo take out the 3 lieutenants. Though he did feel a twinge of guilt, he knew that he needed to save Rukia. Not only because her sentence was wrong, but he also believed that there was something more to this than what he was seeing. Out of the corner of his eyes he saw Byakuya headed towards Ichigo. He didn't have to worry though, as Ichigo was able to grab his clever and block his strike. While continued to fight, Naruto looked over at the captains just in time to see an orange blur tackle Soifun over the edge just as she was about to rush him. He also saw Yamamoto Shunpo away with Yukitake and Kiraku, to fight if he had guess, as they had stopped the execution. With them gone, he turned his attention to the only captain left on the hill, Retsu Unohana. "Greeting, Captain Unohana, lovely day, isn't it?" said Captain, raised one of her elegant eyebrows before asking, "You seem pretty relaxed for someone who has, by law, turned traitor to Seirei, Uzumaki-kun." Naruto chuckled. He had always liked Unohana. He did not what it was that he liked about her. He believed though, that it was her motherly-like attitude and kind nature. "Ah, I am, but I have this feeling that something bad is going to happen and it will explain this situation." Unohana frowned at that. Naruto always seemed to have a sixth sense when something bad was going to happen, no matter how small. That is so long as it surrounded the people he knew. As she thought about what he said, she walked over and revived the 3 lieutenants that the Kurosaki boy had knocked unconscious. Once done, she turned to Izan. "Izan-chan, come with me, I want to check something." "But what about Naruto-san?" she asked while pointing to said boy, who was watching Ichigo's fight with little interest. Unohana smiled as she continued walking. "Do not worry, Izan-chan. If what Naruto said is true, then all will be explained soon." Izan nodded as she followed her captain. Naruto turned to the 2 other lieutenants. "Chojiro-san, Marichio-san, while I cannot give you orders and I am a traitor by law, I would like for you to leave here so that Ichigo and Byakuya can continue their fight. However, do not go too far. I have a feeling that something will happen later on this hill." Naruto could see that they didn't want to listen to him, but could see that the fight was escalating, so they did as Naruto suggested, since they knew that they could not beat the Uzumaki. Naruto watched them go, be whispering, "Why'd I have a feeling that things are going to go very bad?" The end. Now we will see you in the next video.